War. War never changes. Unless you're in West Virginia. Super mutants spurring pockets of colonies throughout the wastes, deathclaws breeding and creating nests across the country, cazadors littering the Mojave wasteland, mutant creatures like bloatflies, mole rats, and radroaches are a constant throughout the landscape, and ghouls persevering through the mutated remains of men and women. The point stands that certain creatures either held to their own regions or migrated outwards in order to hunt and survive. But in the Blue Ridge Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, did a unique and hellish threat emerge, a scourge of a mutagenic infection that makes its victims into a semi-intelligent hive mind, crystallized, flesh-singed zombie horde, all with the dragon-like superbat flying overhead spreading infectious spores, leading the hordes and the disease further. So what does this new outbreak amongst the nuclear waste and its legions of infected mutants mean for your survival? Today, we are discussing why you wouldn't survive Fallout's Scorched Plague. In the time before the bombs dropped, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Thomas Eckhart had begun funneling money from his department into creating the White Spring Bunker. Fearing the inevitable nuclear war, Eckhart successfully evaded the apocalypse with other military and governmental officials. Being a division of the secret government syndicate of the Enclave, Eckhart would find that after communications were lost with DC's branch, that he would become the de facto president of the Enclave in West Virginia. He killed anyone that would oppose his views, and declared that even though the world had been devastated by nuclear hellfire, that he would be dedicated to exterminating the evils of communism. For a long time, he had attempted to procure nuclear launch codes in order to send one last wave of nukes to finish off whatever was left of China. But after failing to procure these WMDs, he decided to have more of his men working on biochemicals and mutations, turning bats into what would later be called Scorched beasts, creating super mutants, and more. He would discover over time that even through underhanded tactics with his own army and sabotaging elections, he still needed to force security measures to believe there was another disaster occurring, enough to push them into DEFCON 1 for the nuclear programs to go active and be usable by him. Thomas Eckhart, in his insane attempts to eradicate communism by tricking everyone, had inadvertently unleashed a terrible blight upon the land. The new president had ordered the release of the gigantic bat dragon, the Scorched Beast, on the greater Appalachia, not knowing of its full capabilities and what he had just done. The Scorched Beast would erupt from the earth below as a dragon-sized abomination of a mutated pygmy bat, flying high above at fantastic speeds, launching concentrated sonic blasts to destroy surfaces and people, landing to use its razor-sharp claws to gash open prey, spending a majority of its time flying around trying to find good enough areas to burrow under the surface to create radioactive tunnels in order to nest. But just being a singular entity of massive proportions can only do so much for a why you wouldn't survive scenario. We could just get some guns and shoot it down. No, its true lethality and scale of its influence comes from its wings. Its body will constantly secrete a particle that, when flapped out by its wings and spread into the air, will act as fungal-like spores. Spreading wherever it flies, the particles will remain in the air, waiting to be inhaled by animals and humans. Once breathed in, a disease known as the Scorched Plague will start to set in. Beginning with a grocery list of symptoms that just go from bad to worse, starting off with the victim's skin beginning to discolor, looking as if it were burnt to a dark black, and then quickly converting to numerous red lesions, exposing the muscles underneath, effectively peeling the skin off your body. Breathing will become labored to an extreme degree as all hair falls off the frame. Most curiously, clusters of a new elemental substance known as ultracite, a hyper-radioactive ore, will painfully protrude through your flesh. Once these outward symptoms have been displayed almost simultaneously, will a person's mind be irreversibly altered. making them extremely aggressive and violent towards any living creature not infected with the plague. While stilted and a bit disjointed, they will still retain the ability to use any and all weapons ranging from melee to firearms in order to incapacitate and even kill prey. Anything in their previous life that could be used solely to harm and or kill others will be remembered to a pretty decent degree. Things really ramp up when you realize a few key features of the Scorched Plague. Any animal or person is susceptible to the outbreak. Any animal, arthropod, insect, bird, amphibian, or reptile can become infected, transforming and mutating to suit the needs of the plague, but be more resilient, lack a sense of self-preservation, and being, of course, way more agitated and violent, making dogs, lions, tigers, bears,
oh my,
and even giant abominations like mirelurks, radtoads, mothmen, and deathclaws into scorched denizens, looking to rip, tear, and maul more so than their healthy counterparts. Being attacked by them could be a death sentence. You might be disemboweled by them, but here's the thing, even if you are able to dispatch them or you're able to survive an encounter with them, receiving just the smallest scratch or getting a drop of blood in you from a scorched person or animal will be enough of a vector to turn you. As stated in the game, the disease is spread by direct contact, possibly droplets like blood, saliva, urine, or even baby batter. The incubation period is inherently random and unknown, so basically spreading like the rage virus from 28 days, except at a slower rate and with much more exaggerated visible symptoms. And with it spreading via multiple methods, many, if not most, living beings will easily contract the disease before knowing any the wiser. The air you breathe, along with the monsters and beasts that attack, all possibly putting the spore in your body for it to fully take hold, leading to the most dangerous and pinnacle articulation to the unsurvivability of this scenario. The mind of every single infected, besides being altered to be ravenous and retain violent tendencies and tools, will also be linked to that of a hive mind intelligence spurred by the ever-growing population of scorched beasts that will be flying about the land. All scorched will work in conjunction to the greater good of the bats, more specifically to that of the scorched beast queens, giant scorched beasts commanding all infected as they develop and make more elaborate underground hives and systems, while infected on the surface keep spreading their numbers. The infected will all attack targets and the healthy in tandem with one another, teaming up, never looking to harm each other. The scorch infected will even heed the call of a scorch beast as if being summoned to defend them and attack with them. Whether this is telepathic or through a system of pheromones released by the big bats, the scorched will obey their beast bosses and always work with one another. Creatures of all creeds will be unified under the Scorched flag, never discriminating those within their skin-ripped ranks, no matter what animal they were prior. But here is the thing, human Scorched are most likely doomed to die no matter what though. While not observed in other species, Homo sapien hosts will eventually crumble to nothing but radioactive dust. Scorched will randomly survey their surrounding environments, either searching for viable victims to attack or awaiting commands from the scorched beasts. Until then, yes, a scorched will just meander about doing nothing. Not in the same vein as a zombie that will just do things remembering their past lives vaguely, like I've mentioned time and time again. Scorched will always be on edge, wielding their weapon of choice in case something comes for them to kill or infect. Eventually, the body of the Scorched will hit a specific point in its own biological clock, and the host body will begin to seize up. Striking a pose like they're in large amounts of unbearable pain, a scorched human will seemingly go into a paralytic dormancy as if frozen in time, not moving a muscle, mistakenly making newcomers believe these are some of the victims flash cooked by the blast of the nuclear bombs. This is marked as the early signs of petrification. If these scorched humans are triggered by outside stimuli, these frozen scorched will be shaken from their comatose. But if they are never awakened, the ultracite crystal formations all over their body will slowly but surely consume the entirety of the frame, turning the body into a hollow and fragile husk of radioactive rocks that, when touched or barely even moved, will instantly disintegrate into ash and glowing rock, spewing out a small volume of radiation around it, possibly inflicting radiation poisoning to anyone nearby. It's important to note that at this point, the plague is all but gone from the frame and has instead hardened the body completely into the new element of ultracite. These are again only noted amongst human hosts, while other infected can either live prolonged or indefinite lives under the influence of the Scorched Plague. Within the lore of Fallout 76, all standing factions within Appalachia were all too busy at being odds with one another to understand the severity of the Scorched Plague that was slowly seeping its way across the land. By the time it was acknowledged fully, it was too little, too late. The Scorched were just too expansive, too infectious, and its main form of infection via the Scorch Beast was too durable, swift, and infectious in its own regard. Not even the Brotherhood of Steel's advanced weaponry, armor, and precautions like killing all infected or supposedly infected could do anything to slow the wildfire that was this pandemic. People from factions like the Free States discovered ways of detecting the Scorched, and the responders were even close to a vaccine breakthrough. But due to the continuing onslaught of the highly infectious legions of Scorched, all efforts would be for naught, as everyone would eventually either be a corpse or an infected, with the Scorched Plague needing living bodies from which to operate and infect. Every person in the region was eventually finished off or evacuated from the land just over 15 years after the first Scorch Beast, meaning there is nothing but the Scorched and other creatures adorning the landscape, with the Scorch Beasts eradicating the very last remnants of healthy humanity back in Morgantown Airport. The land would be dominated by its apex predator, the Scorch Beast, as it continued to rain down scorched spores from above for 2 more years until Vault 76's doors opened for the healthy residents to reclaim the scorched landscape. The 76 dwellers would seek to create vaccines against the plague through the leftover notes and terminals of the former factions. They were somehow able to inoculate themselves to be immune to the Scorched Plague from the scraps of Appalachia, and were even able to create a vaccine, of which they administered through soft drinks, aka Nuka-Cola, to be drunk by settlers of all kinds, preventing further spread through soda consumption. Through the power of onset diabetes would a horrific disease be defeated. The 76 dwellers would then go on to attack the problem at its source by accessing nuclear compounds, bypassing safety measures, and launching nuclear warheads directly at the nests of the Scorched Beasts, cracking open their torn entrances just in an attempt, that's right, in an attempt to lure out the actual queen, just to wage direct combat with it to supposedly end further spreads of the plague. It requires launching a nuke at a nest just to get the queen to come out to kill to stop this plague from furthering. Killing the queen, however, would not fully eradicate the threat, but would greatly diminish its numbers and fragment the hive mind intelligence to slow it down. Without people to infect and vaccines more widely available, the Scorched Plague would most likely become a distant memory over time, as much as the advent of its variety of infectable creatures would have it still cropping up. With more people means more countermeasures and vaccination methods for all life that could be made. So with that being said, how would this ultimately mean something against your general survival? It's easy for me to say that, okay, well, if you really think about it, the epidemic starts after nukes have dropped on the world. And if that's the case, yeah, we are 100% screwed. Obliteration via nuclear hellfire, or coming out of safety just for a dude obsessed with communism to send out an even worse threat that makes a disease from radiation monsters that picks off what's left of us. But what if it were to break out as it is now in our current timeline and environment? What if a colony of scorched beasts just suddenly bursted into the air and started spraying their wing spores all over? Well, for a majority of the population, there is not much you can do to avoid inhaling the scorched bacterium. Unless you're in a well-sealed place or donning a breathing apparatus, just a molecule of this stuff will have you infected. Every animal and person that has been in the approximate area underneath the flight path of a scorched beast will be more than likely a carrier, thanks to this fungi's ability to be non-discriminate on who it can poison. It's an equal opportunity employer. Everything that basically isn't either a plant or a radioactive freak is fair game. So imagine dragons is safe. Fauna and people alike mutating to jerky mummies covered in green pop rocks, becoming ultra aggro. Now, if you weren't the portion of individuals caught in the infectious spore path in the beginning, then those that do get sick and turn in the coming hours or days can seek to rectifying that mistake and effing you up by infecting you or outright slaughtering you with their bare hands, their teeth, their claws, their guns, their melee weapons. There is a whole litany of ways of stomping your ass and extinguishing your life. Scorched beasts, being of a hive mind, will most likely spread themselves outward in all different directions in flight paths to maximize their influential radius. Knowing the potential danger of allowing the general public of people to know what the sheer presence of these scorched beasts mean, as they all find wide open, deserted areas to burrow in and make nests out of so they can bide their time, occasionally coming out to swoop down and eat people and animals, as well as spraying more spores as it travels further out to find new nests. In the first few days, the public would be more concerned with freaking bat dragons flying about and eating people rather than worrying about some of that icky dust that's making some people cough. What is it to worry about? It's probably just dirt that fell off its wings. Well, after symptoms have cropped up, it'll be probably too late as civilians start to attack one another, with others fearing hurting them. They just got a couple green pimples all over them. Why do we gotta shoot them? As I stated before, one scratch or drop of blood getting in you could mean you turning as well. All infected being able to beat you to death with melee weapons or gun you down means simply taking the zombie outbreak mentality will not be enough for this why you wouldn't survive scenario, especially since every single animal around is probably bedazzled with ultrasight. But how do you survive when every living creature could possibly turn at random and try to bite, scratch, or spray infectious material at you?
That's the neat thing. You don't.
Even if the real world doesn't have hyper-mutated animals of extreme sizes like those found in Fallout, like having a giant frog for instance, insects like mosquitoes in our world merely pricking you to spread the plague is enough to mean you are dead and or infected, your pets suddenly changing to attack, birds swooping down to peck at you. Anything can be a vector of violence. It's the versatility in anything contracting an airborne spore to become an infectious carrier through droplets that makes this such an unsurvivable scenario. The Fallout universe was able to pick up the pieces and piece together what was left of the vaccine and inoculation research, as well as being able to acquire nukes to properly fight and destroy the major threats of the Scorched Plague. However, that could be chalked up to plot convenience. The population of Appalachia was already heavily diminished by the time the plague started doing numbers. A fully populated society with ecosystems to take control of would be much worse for us. That's not even considering the fact that in Fallout, creatures like ghouls with high internal radiation levels were naturally immune to the plague. Nothing here in reality can live like that. Now, attempts would be made in reality to make vaccines and cures, but amidst the chaos, even if something were made, distributing it would be a nightmare while the Scorched waged all-out war with our own weapons. The Nuka-Cola-like vaccine will only be good for prevention. There will be no way to cure an infected since this whole outbreak is fungal in nature. The only chance would be to bunker up and hope that launching nukes at sites would lure out queens and then wiping out infected populations. But even our best weapons would be utilized by them at some point. Bunkering down would mean infected humans would all petrify at some point, but the scorched creatures out there would continue to persist, especially with the scorched beasts consistently flying overhead, searching for new populations to ravage, destroy, and consume. Unless they are quickly gunned down, nothing will be done. Yes, we can easily obliterate these faux dragons with prep time, but their spores will already have done their business in rearranging your organs. Plus, there's no telling in their hive mind efforts if they have chosen to hide other scorched beasts in case they die within nests around the world to germinate as infected populations continue to increase. The chaos of it all would be too much to create a vaccine in time, as we nuke places just to kill the source of it all to no avail. The last of mankind will end up hardening into mummified and pain-filled statues of every man, woman, and child, until the winds of time eventually destroy us, and our remains are but dust in the wind, and all that's left are the ultrasite and its radiation to have caused all of this fallout. That about wraps up this scorching hot look into the Fallout universe, into what many probably didn't know was a decent amount of lore and world building for a game that was brushed to the side because of a horrible launch. What did you think? Can you survive? Did I miss out on something about these skinless red rockets? Maybe in the future we can revisit the Fallout franchise with the new Amazon TV series out. Special shout out to Chago aka Quick Flicks for editing today's video together, and thanks to my Patreon patrons and YouTube channel members for supporting the channel by throwing in $1 to have their names featured here. You can do the same, and for patrons you can see the videos a day early. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm Zackass aka WowSuch Gaming. Never forget to stay happy, stay healthy, drink Nuka-Cola, and stay wow.